Hey y'all, and welcome to this week's From the Vault episode from the Magdalen House podcast. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas, and known affectionately by many as Maggies. Every first and third Wednesday, we bring you a new release, and our From the Vault episodes, we share podcast releases from our 3 different podcast series: Recover Ed, Recovered, Interviews with Alcoholics, and Hope for the Family. Our podcasts aim to connect, inspire, and educate alcoholics, loved ones, and the community to the Magdalen House and the services we offer. We are so glad that you're here. Thanks for listening.
Okay, good morning, podcast listeners and Next Up participants. My name is Stephanie Crawford, and I am the program manager here for Next Up, and I am also the host of this podcast, where we get to talk to a recovered alcoholic woman each week and hear her experience and hope and ask her a question. We typically don't get to ask in regular meetings, and I like to think of them as God conversations. So whatever comes up, I just trust that it's God's will and it's intended to come up. So our guest today, I'm really excited about. One of the things that I can say about Deanna is because since I work in Next Up, I get to see things from like the other side. And one of the things that I have seen consistently about Deanna is what a great mentor she is in the Meeting Shadow program. Her shadows and her mentees always learn a lot from. Really appreciate the time that you to teach them. But it's just amazing. I think it's one of the things that makes our program so special. So just thank you first and foremost for that. So our guest is Deanna, and she's one of our meeting chairs, volunteers, sponsors, all of, and she's here to talk to us about her story. And the question is always just give us a little bit of background to qualify yourself as an alcoholic and what led you to get sober.
All right. Well, thank you. That was an awesome introduction. You know, it's an honor to do any service work for God. And this program, the 12 steps and what saved my life. A little bit about me. Well, you know, I think something that's really, you know, a little bit different about my story is I started drinking really, really young, like super young. I was probably 10 or 11 the first time I tried alcohol, and I loved it. I distinctly remember the feeling. I remember feeling beautiful and funny and smart, and which all of those things I never thought that I was. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I'm going to do this forever. I'm going to do this forever because this makes me feel how I want to feel on the inside, which I always felt I was lacking. I was the shy girl, stand in the corner, only speak when spoken to, thought, you know, what I said you thought was going to be dumb or stupid or whatever. And so I chased that. I believe I was an alcoholic right from the very start. I have never drank moderately a day in my life. That is not in my vocabulary. What I learned later about alcoholism is that doesn't qualify me as an alcoholic because I started in the beginning with the allergy of the body. A lot of us start moderately and then cross the invisible line into alcoholism. That wasn't me. You know, we could be different in that way, but for me, I had the allergy right away. I always had it. Once I had that buzz, I was like, I want more. And I just always thought, I'm the girl who likes to have fun. I like to have more fun than everybody else, obviously. And so I know for sure I had the allergy really, really quick. Once I put it in, I couldn't stop. And, you know, that was pretty consistent all the way through my drinking. And it just continuously got worse and worse and worse and worse. I was drinking more and more and more and more. By the time I quit drinking when I was 22, I mean, the amounts that I was drinking was just astronomical. It was, you know, half gallons of Crown. It was 24 packs of beer. It was 4 bottles of wine. It was, you know, just large amounts. So I knew when I came to AA and they told me about the allergy, I was like, yes, check it off the list. That's me for sure. And then as far as the mental obsession, for me, that was the harder piece to swallow. I was a very independent woman and I created my own life. And when I got sober, I was 22 and I was making $100,000 a year at this job. And I had the brand new truck and I had the brand new boyfriend and I had the brand new apartment. And, you know, my whole life, I thought an alcoholic was a person who, you know, was a bum underneath the bridge, who had lost everything, who'd been divorced. And externally looked a lot different than me. And so when I came to AA, it was a harder pill for me to swallow, that I could not control my drinking with my brain, because I could control everything else with my brain. I dropped out of high school when I was 17, and I went back and I graduated when I was 19. And I did that. I used my willpower to do that. I'd been to jail, 10, 15 times. I had 2 DWIs. I was living with my friends, had no car, had no responsibility of my own. And I said, I'm going to grow up. And I did that. And I used my willpower and I did that. So, for me, it was really, really hard for me to accept the idea that I could not control my drinking with my own brain. And I couldn't make the decision to do that or have the willpower to do that. And so it took me a few years in AA to actually fully understand my truth around that mental obsession, and to know that my brain is always going to lead me back to it. And I can't just decide to never do it again. Without a spiritual program of action, my brain always leads me back to it. It's either going to tell me, number one, it's a good idea again, here's why, or number two, I don't have any other choice. And so for me, I've been in AA now for about 16 years. And over those, 16 years, I've been sober now almost coming up on 8. And I know that's still my truth. That's really what I've learned is the step one full truth, is that I will drink no matter what, left up to my own devices. If I'm trying to use my body and my brain to overcome alcoholism, it's not going to work. It never works. No matter what period of sobriety I'm at in my life over these 15 years, anytime I've tried to use myself instead of the program of action, the spiritual program of action, God, my higher power, my brain always says, drink again. Always, every single time.
Thank you so much. Great job of explaining the mental obsession and the physical allergy too. Now, one of the things that I think would be interesting to talk about is, well, there's lots of things that I think would be interesting to talk about, but the first thing I think would be you got sober at 22. And I think this is still can be said about you, is that you have a lot of fun in recovery and a lot of variety. Do you just mind talking about like getting sober young, and maybe talking who thinks their life is going to be over now that they have to be sober for the rest of their lives?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely thought that because I got sober really young. I was 22 and I was like, okay, I have to get sober and sit on my couch for the rest of my life and be a boring person and not get to do anything fun. Or I thought I would have to be this spiritual guru or Mother Teresa or whatever, and I'm neither of those things today. I have freedom in my life today, a lot of freedom. I can go anywhere. I can do anything. I mean, I, get to go out with my friends and have fun with them. They can be drinking. I don't have to be drinking. I don't even think about drinking. I remember I got invited to a wedding in Cancun. I was early in sobriety. I think I was probably maybe 2 years sober, something like that, maybe 3. And I got invited to this wedding. And I just remember us going out to these, nightclubs or bars or whatever. And I'm having mocktails or I'm having Red Bulls or whatever. And of course, I'm having a blast. I'm dancing on the dance floor. We're laughing, we're joking, we're having fun. And the next day, one of the guys that was there, he gives me a shot. And I go, oh man, I don't drink. And he goes, yeah, you do. Like, what do you mean? He's like, you drink? You are being just as crazy as we were last night. Yeah, you drink. And I was like, no, I don't need alcohol to be crazy. That comes naturally. And that was kind of like my first experience in sobriety, really understanding that I didn't need alcohol to be fun. And that didn't really have anything to do with me either. All it had to do with is that, I worked the steps. God restored my brain to sanity. And in doing that, I was able to figure out who Deanna actually was on the inside. because I never really knew that. I never knew that. I never understood that. I didn't know how to be comfortable. I didn't know how to be outgoing. I didn't know who I was. I was just this awkward girl. And in sobriety, what I learned early in sobriety, which is such a blessing, was who I was, and that I could be this fun, carefree, happy-go-lucky person who was a part of. I'd never been a part of before without alcohol. So it was a huge blessing. And that was my first experience with that. I started bartending in sobriety, and a lot of people don't like me to talk about that. I still bartend today. I've never bartended drinking before. I've only bartended in sobriety. And that is a level of freedom that is amazing for me. I don't sit in my bar and watch people drink and wish that I was drinking with them, ever. Never. I look at them and I'm like, ugh, gross. Gross. It is not appealing to me. It is super unappealing to me. I don't think that alcohol is going to slide out of the bottle and, jump out of the bottle and slide down my throat. I'm not insane when it comes to alcohol. People offer me shots all the time. Hey, can I buy you a shot? And because my brain has been restored to sanity, I'm like that person who's allergic to strawberries now. They offer me the shot and I go, bad shit happens. I can't put that in my body. I have sanity around my alcoholism. I remember vividly what happens when I drink. And I know what my truth is today. I know when I put that one shot in, I'm off to the races. And what I always say to people when they don't understand, they're like, what do you mean? You don't drink, whatever. I say, man, think about when you're at a bar and you see someone and you think to yourself, God, they should not drink. Hot mess city. That's me. That's me. I'm that girl. I've got one shoe off. My hair is crazy. My eyeliner's running down my face. You know what I mean? Like, I'm that girl that you don't want to take care of and you don't want to be around. I know. I know that. I can see that. I understand that. That knowledge, that experience, that I can remember the pain and suffering, all of that stuff because of the program, because of God, because that restored to sanity brain is with me today. And I can do anything that I want, like I don't ever go into an experience today where alcohol is involved and wish that I was drinking, which is a miracle for this girl. Because for me, when I first came to the program when I was 22, I could not imagine my life without drinking. I couldn't imagine it. I thought alcohol made Deanna Deanna. I got my second DWI right before I came to AA. And I distinctly remember the judge looking at me and saying, Deanna, you can never drink for the rest of your life. And when he said that to me, my thought was like, why don't you tell me just don't breathe? Same thing, right? I drank in the shower. I drank in the car. I drank inside Walmart. Alcohol was my life. And for me today to sit here and tell y'all the truth of my life now, but I can't imagine my life with alcohol, huge miracle, huge blessing. Like, I can't imagine myself drinking anymore. It's not a thing, and so it is cool that we can still experience life. I don't have to run from life. I don't have to hide. Am I going and sitting at a bar and trying to steal pleasure vicariously from people drinking? Absolutely not. But I can go and I can dance, or I can listen to a band, or I can go out to eat and my friends drink or whatever. I even had a relationship a couple of years ago where, my partner kept a bottle of Jack Daniels on top of the refrigerator. Jack Daniels used to be my drink, and it didn't bother me, not even one time. It was not a thing, right? And that is such a cool promise of this program, is that if I continue to work the steps, if I continue to grow that relationship with my higher power, my insanity being relieved is permanent. It's permanent. I can have sanity in my brain and be able to tell the difference forever. And, that's paramount in my life today. And so many women, I feel so bad. They're like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I can't hang out with my friends. I can't have this job. I can't. And I'm like, that's not what the book says. The book says is that we can be happy, joyous, and free. And, my sponsor used to say to me all the time, Deanna, how free do you want to be? How free do you want to be? When I was balking and I didn't want to do an amends, or I didn't want to do, like you said, you were talking about a 10th step earlier, when I didn't want to do a 10th step, or, I don't want to go help somebody or whatever. How free do you want to be? And today I'm super free, super duper free.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can definitely tell too. And I know that has not been your experience the whole time. So can you talk about the difference between being sober and being recovered, and your experience with just being sober and being?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so, I wish that I could say I came to the program in 2006 and I haven't drank since then. That is not the case. And it's not the case for a lot of us, and that's all right. What my experience is I stopped working the program. I came to AA when I was 22, and unfortunately, I didn't come to an AA group where they worked the steps out of the book. It was an open discussion meeting. They used the fellowship for recovery. And, that worked for me for a little while. The book talks a lot about, camaraderie, how we feel camaraderie when we come to AA. Gives the example of the shipwreck, right? How, we're shipwrecked together, and, we become saved, and that joyousness and that camaraderie and all of that stuff that binds us together. And that's how I felt, going to that first AA meeting that I went to. Is I felt a part of, people were kind of telling my story all the way around the room. And, I knew that they drank like me. I knew that they thought like me. And I had never really met anybody who, thought like me, or at least admitted that they thought like me. And so in that AA meeting, I found that camaraderie. The problem with that meeting is they didn't offer a solution. And their solution was fellowship. And I tried that, and man, I wanted to drink big time. And I ended up finding, thank God, a man who was annoyingly happy. And he would walk in the room and I'd be like, oh God, here he is, this annoyingly happy dude. And he always carried around a book, but he seemed to be happy, joyous, and free. Like he wasn't sulking, sitting in the meeting. He wasn't pissed off. He wasn't, being negative. He wasn't, talking negative about his life. And this guy had something that I wanted. And he pointed me towards a woman who worked me out of the book. And he told me I could call her and immediately get her as a sponsor. And if I still wanted to drink, I should go drink. And I was appalled. I was like, how dare you tell me to go drink? Today I understand why he told me that. And it's because, alcohol is the great persuader. Nobody's going to persuade me that I need to work the steps. Alcohol is going to persuade me of that. But I didn't need persuading back then. I knew that I was an alcoholic. And so I was able to work the steps out of the book. And, with this sponsor, within 2 weeks, I was not having any more panic attacks. I was not thinking about drinking like I had been previous to those 2 weeks. And I was free, and I felt it. I felt it in my heart and soul that I was free. I stayed on that path for a long time. She taught me to carry the message, and I went to treatment centers and halfway houses and, all of these things, and went and learned how to speak, learned from somebody really, really good who was a great speaker on how to, do the foundation meeting, how to present the message in an adequate way where people could understand me. And it was awesome. It was the most happy time in my life that I'd ever had. And I did that for, I want to say, probably about 4 or 5 years. And then I got a job opportunity to be a general manager at the bar that I was working at. And I just thought to myself, I deserve this. I deserve this manager position. I was in my 30s, I think by then. No, I guess late 20s. And I just thought, I should have my shit together by now. I should have, a better life. I should be making more money and da-da-da. I accepted the manager position. And I had so many hours and so many responsibilities that I just started leaning off of the program. I would sponsor less women. I, would cut down my commitments. Then I started cutting down my meetings, and it just kind of went sliding backwards, backwards, backwards. Eventually, I didn't sponsor any women at all. Eventually, I didn't have time to do those commitments anymore. Eventually, I stopped going to my AA meeting that I was going to. I became spiritually sick again. I started getting into fear. I was in self-pity. I was having a lot of resentment. And I began to get blocked off, and I ended up having an affair with my boss. And that was a really, really hard pill for me to swallow, because I knew that was not what God would want me to do. I was actually really sorry for it. And I went back to my sponsor, and I told my sponsor what had happened, and that I was really sorry for it. My boss was married, and I was married at that time too. And my sponsor said, well, she pointed me to the big book, and she said, Deanna, what it says in the big book when it talks about sex is that if you're really sorry for it and you've learned your lesson, you're probably not going to drink, and, ask God for forgiveness and let's move on. And I was on board with that. But what happened was I didn't get back on the program. I didn't pick back up those commitments. I didn't pick back up those meetings. I didn't start sponsoring again. I didn't get back on 10, 11, and 12. And so as a result of that, I don't know what the word to call it is. I guess that resentment I had towards myself just kind of carried on, and I kept going on with the affair. And so I knew in my heart of hearts that, I couldn't continue to work the program if I was not following God. And so I completely left the program at that time. What my experience is that I didn't drink for about a year and a half. I was praying a little bit still, because I knew that I needed God through those years of experience in AA, but I wasn't calling my sponsor. I wasn't, working the steps. I wasn't doing anything with AA, but I was praying to God a little bit, right? What started to happen is I became really, really depressed. And I would cry in my bathtub once a week. my boyfriend would come home, and he'd be like, oh my God, is it Tuesday? Right? I have Adele on, and I'm like doing like the ugly cries, And that was pretty consistent, crying in my bathtub once a week. And I was trying to make this man my God. I wanted him to make me feel smart and pretty and confident, and all of those things that I described before that I was able to get from God. I didn't have alcohol as my solution, even though I was praying God wasn't my solution. And so I made him my solution. And I didn't do that knowingly. I was doing that subconsciously. And I also did a lot of other things. I started shopping like a crazy woman, like I would go out and I would just drop money, trying to make myself feel better. All of these self-improvements, getting my hair done, getting my nails done, always having my makeup done every day. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but, I was trying to use those things to fill that void that I kept feeling. And it just never worked. I still felt broken all the time. I was very successful in my management position that I had. My store was number one out of all of the locations. And, I had a lot of pride in my work, but it wasn't enough. That wasn't enough either. I found myself being cocky a lot at work. And the book talks about that too. When it made us cocky, it was worse. And, I had that false self-confidence. I was super cocky, and I would talk crap to any other manager from any other store. My store is the best, right? And that went on for a little while. It went on for about a year and a half, until finally one day I had so much emotional distress that my mind said, Deanna, you need to go drink. And that scared me a lot. I distinctly remember sitting on my couch and arguing with the voice in my head. I was in tears. My mind had not said drink since, I don't know, like that first year I was sober when I was 22. And it scared me. And I was arguing with this voice, and this voice was saying, you got to go drink. You can't handle this amount of emotional torture that you're going through. You got to go drink. And I'm saying to this voice, no, I can't go drink. You got to go drink. No, that's crazy. I'm not going to drink. You got to go drink. I can't drink. You got to go drink. it's not going to be just one drink. I can't, and I'm sitting here arguing with this voice. And eventually I make a deal with the voice because I was fighting with my now husband, my second husband at this time. And we got married really, really fast. And, I made a deal with the voice that if my husband was at this, place and wasn't consoling my emotional state, that he didn't love me and I should go drink. And so I go to the place and he's there and he's not caring about me making a scene. And I go to the bar. The thing that was different about this time that I drank was my mind didn't tell me that it was going to be different. My mind didn't say, Deanna, you're going to go and you're going to take the edge off and you're just going to have a couple of drinks and you're going to be great. I knew exactly what was going to happen because I knew what my truth was around alcohol still. I knew I had the allergy of the body. I knew once I put it in, I was going to be off to the races and I was probably going to go to jail because that's my story. Jail does not make me an alcoholic. Jail makes me crazy when I'm drunk. Okay. I go to jail because I'm crazy, not because I'm an alcoholic, but that's part of my story. And so I went to this bar. I pre-texted my husband. I'm at this bar. I'm drunk. Come get me. Because I knew I was going to be way too drunk to text it by the time I needed to. And so I went to the bar. I hadn't drank in 7 years. My tab was $75 in 1 hour. I was by myself. The last thing I remember is somebody that I knew being there and saying, you should text your husband. I don't remember anything after that. And my husband said, when he got there, the cops had me. That's just me. Right? That's the way that I drink. I hadn't drank in 7 years. $75 worth of booze in 1 hour. I blacked out and the cops had me. I knew at that point when I came to that it wasn't about not drinking. It wasn't about the fact that, I couldn't not drink. And that confused me because a lot of people said, like, I can't go 2 days without drinking. I can't go a week without drinking. I can't go a month without drinking. There's a story in the book that talks about this man of, I believe it's the man of 30, who he stops drinking for a long period of time. And then when he picks it back up, he crosses the invisible line and he can never go back. For me, I thought because I'd stopped for that year and a half, that there was no possible way that I could ever go back. That my mind would never tell me I should go back, that self-knowledge about the allergy of my body and the obsession of my brain would keep me sober forever because I knew that I couldn't drink. I knew it. And that long stint of dryness, and I want to call it sobriety because I wasn't happy, joyous, and free, that long stint of dryness would mean that I was an alcoholic. But as soon as I relapsed, I was worse than the last time that I drank. And the book talks about that in great detail, right? Is that alcoholism is a progressive illness. I'm always getting worse, never getting better. That 7 years of sobriety didn't stop me from having a crazy, crazy time that next time that I relapsed. And I haven't relapsed since then. But what my experience is today is that when I get away from the program, and if I totally block God off, that obsession to drink does come back.
If you or someone you know is a woman who wants to sustain and grow in her recovery, check out our 3-month non-residential program. Next Step offers community, structure, and accountability to any alcoholic woman at absolutely no cost. Everything we do in Next Step, from the assignments to the accountability group, is to help alcoholic women not only stay sober, but thrive in her recovery. Because we have both in-person and virtual options, we can help women from all over the world. To call and do a phone screen to see if you qualify, call 214-764-0793, extension 500.
And I've had that obsession one other time in the last 8 years. And it was because I got mad at God. We got in a fight, right? And I was being a little brat. I'm like, we're not talking. Nope, I'm mad at you. I'm not going to pray. I'm not going to follow you. Nope, we're in a fight. We're in a fight, right? And we were in a fight for about 3 days before my brain said, Deanna, you should go drink. And I was like, okay, God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. I don't want to do this, right? And I didn't have to drink that time, but I was still really close to the program. I was still, talking to my sponsor. I was still doing everything I was supposed to do. I had just shunned God, and that's my 100% truth. If I do not follow 10, 11, and 12 consistently, and consistently doesn't mean perfectly, because I thought consistently meant perfectly, right? I have to be perfect. I have to be Mother Teresa. I can't make any mistakes. No, I make a lot of mistakes. I'm not perfect. But what I am is willing. I'm willing to consistently try. And what I've learned throughout the years of sobriety is not being perfect allows me to grow closer with God. It makes that relationship with God bigger and bigger and bigger. Every time I mess up and then I have to ask God for help, my relationship with God gets bigger. It changes. It becomes different. I acquire faith. I believe that's how faith is acquired now because it's my experience. Every single time I blow my own life up because I follow my self-will and I don't follow God's, I realize that I don't know what the right word is for it. I realize that the path with God is so much easier than the path that I could ever make for myself. And that faith is acquired. And I become aware of how powerful my higher power is in my life when I let him be, and how unpowerful he is when I don't let him be, right? And I didn't realize that for a long time. I just thought, God's going to be God and I'm going to run my own life and he's going to help me when he wants to, and that's it. And today I know that's not true. I know what the truth is like, if I let God be a part of my life, then he can help me. And only then, if I let him.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You said something that I really, really liked, and you said along the lines of, I was praying to God because I knew I needed God, but God wasn't my solution. Do you mind elaborating on that? Like, what is the difference between praying to God and then having God be your solution?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a big difference between belief and reliance. I had to learn that the hard way. I was trying to simply ask God to help me. A lot of times I was begging God to help me. Please help me. Please help me to not be depressed. Please help me to get through today. Please, remove this pain that I'm feeling in my body. And I was asking, but I wasn't doing anything about it. I wasn't changing anything in my life. I wasn't pursuing any type of solution to the pain that I was having. I was trying to go to church. I even started going to church, and I hadn't really done that since I was a kid. But the thing about it is like, I believe why the 12 steps work and why church didn't work for me is because I need a program of action that disciplines me every single day, right? Church, I can go to every Sunday and be real spiritual for about an hour. And then I go home and I'm not spiritual anymore. I believe that God's there, but how do I have access to God's power? That's what I was lacking the whole time, is access to the power that I needed so desperately. And what my experience shows in working the steps in my life today is that the steps give me access to God's power. Because what I didn't realize at that time is all of those things I kept saying that I needed help with, the fear, the self-pity, the resentment, the anger, all those things actually block me off from God. Even though I knew God was there, I knew God was real, I knew that he could save my life because he'd saved my life before. I knew that I could be happy, joyous, and free. Just simply believing in God didn't work because all of those character defects were blocking me off from his power. In working the steps again the second time, when I came back to the program in 2014, what I realized is when I did my fifth step with my sponsor, when I did 6 and 7 and asked God to remove it, did my amends, made my list and did my amends in steps 8 and 9, God unblocked me at that point, right? I asked God to remove those character defects in 6 and 7, and I became unblocked. Does that mean that God renders me white as snow and I'm totally perfect and everything's awesome and I'm never in fear or anger or self-pity for the rest of my life? No. I still have those things, often a lot. But what happened is I was able to connect to that power because I didn't have a ton of things blocking me off. I didn't have a ton of those, resentments or anger or self-pity. I had some, but it wasn't obsessive. And so I could access the power of God. And then in doing 10, 11, and 12, 10 is my daily chore that I do. I like to call it a chore because sometimes it's a chore. I'm like, I gotta call my sponsor. It's not always a fun thing. But as we all know, even though chores aren't fun, they make our life better, right? It's something that I have to do to make my life better, my quality of life better. And so, doing that chore of step 10 has kept me unblocked. And then expanding my relationship with God in step 11 through meditation, actually listening, because that's one thing I wasn't doing as well. I was praying, asking, never listening, never. God was talking to me, but I wasn't listening, right? Expanding my ability to hear God, what God wants me to do in step 11. And then, of course, getting out of myself and helping other people in step 12, and not only helping other alcoholics, but the part I was always missing in step 12, the second part, which was practicing these principles in all my affairs, right? I was not doing that second part to step 12 previous to this whole experience of me staying dry for so long. And so reliance and belief, two completely different things. And today I still do that sometimes. Sometimes I'll take back my will. I'll start running the show myself. I believe in God. I pray to God. I do all these things, but somehow the needed power isn't there. And what I realize is like, oh, wait, I'm not relying on God. I haven't 10-stepped. I'm consumed with fear. I'm not asking God what I should do and listening for the answer. I'm trying to make my own decisions and my own conclusions about what I should do in my own life. And I'm sure not, when I'm doing that, practicing the principles in my life either. The program gives me the discipline that I need. It says, do this when you wake up, do this when you go to bed, do this when you get angry, do this when you get in self-pity, do this when you have sex problems, right? It gives me that design for living that I need because I am an undisciplined person. You would think after being in the program since 2006 that I wouldn't need God. I wouldn't need the book and I would know how to live my life. Not true for this girl. If I get away from all of that stuff, man, I start running the show again. Every single time I start pushing my will, I start running the show, I become cocky, I become afraid, I don't participate in life well, I don't play well with others when God is not involved. And so, I know today that even though the beginning of the program, step two is about belief, but the rest of the program after step 3 is about reliance. In steps 4 through 12, I'm showing God how willing I am to stay sober. And that's only done through action. I've learned that this program is not a cerebral program. It's not something that I just think about. It's not a theory. It's not an idea. It's a way of living, which means I have to take action through my life.
That was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of totally flip things a minute. Do you mind talking about dating and recovery and dating and sobriety? I know you're in a relationship.
Yeah.
And so do you mind just talking to us about that?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of things set out there in AA land about dating and recovery, right? We hear a lot of weird stuff and, it's all well-intentioned stuff. Me as a sponsor, I don't believe in giving advice to my ladies that I sponsor, my proteges, if you want to call them that. I don't believe in giving them a rule on dating. I know a lot of sponsors are like, don't date for 90 days, don't date for a year, don't. For me, that's between you and God. I'm not anybody's mother, anybody's counselor, anything like that. What I believe through my own experience in working the steps and having a lot of relationships through sobriety, unfortunately, is that I have to be well within myself to have a healthy relationship. And that I can rely on a relationship just like I rely on alcohol, 100%. Alcohol is the solution to my problem. It's never been anything else but the solution. And like I said before, I can try to make a relationship the solution. And I've done a lot of that in sobriety, actually. Being sober, working the steps, sponsoring people, carrying the message. I have turned to the relationship, to the man, and tried to make him my God still. And it's never done consciously. It's always done subconsciously. Even though God has restored me to sanity, my spiritual black hole of not good enough, not smart enough, not pretty enough is way smaller than it used to be. I do still have it a little bit, and it's really easy, I think, for me to get locked in this idea that I need a man to be happy. For me, I put God in a box for a long time. And for many years, I said to God, I need to be married, and I need to have a baby, and I need to have a house. There's my box, God. And I'm going to be happy when you give me that, but I'm not going to be happy till you give me that. And that was a mistake, because I was forcing my will upon God. Give me this. Give me this. This is what I need. This is what I want. I have to have this to be happy. And what I'm here to tell y'all is that I'm not married today. I do not have any kids of my own. I've never had a baby, and I don't have a house. And I am so happy. This is the most happy that I've ever been in my whole life. And I don't have those things that I required, quote unquote, from God to be happy. I'm so glad that I was able to set those old ideas aside, and I was able to tell God, you know what? I'm yours. You can do with me what you want. Maybe my idea of what my life should be isn't the right one. Maybe you have a different, better one for me. And I was able to set those ideas aside. I tried to have a baby in my marriages for years and never was able to have any. And there's nothing wrong with me. I went to the doctor and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly fine. You can have a child if you want. And I just didn't allow it. And what I realized is that he didn't allow it because I was meant to take my brother's kids. I took my brother's kids 6 years ago, 3 of them. And if I had a baby, would I have been able to do that? Absolutely not, right? God had a different plan for me. And so I was able to do that. I still have 2 of them. I was able to allow God to impact their lives in a way that they would have never had if I hadn't taken them. In doing all of that and relying on God, I've been able to see through the years in different relationships that I've had that when I rely on God to fill the void of not good enough, not smart enough, not pretty enough, when I allow God to fix that within me, and I don't rely on the man to fix that within me, I am happy. And that, no man is ever going to be able to do what God can do. And it's unrealistic and it's unfair for me to ask a man to do that. Because on the flip side of that, if a man is asking me to be that person for him, if he wants me to be his only happiness, to be the person who makes him feel, handsome and smart and all of these things, if I'm that person that he's relying on for that, he's in trouble, right? Because I'm going to let him down because I'm a human being, right? I'm never going to be capable of being somebody's total life happiness. And through working the steps, even working the steps through this relationship idea, I've been able to see how me healing, relying on God for all of those things I need to fill that big black spiritual void, I'm able to have a partner in life today. And that partner enriches my life. They make my life better. They make me feel amazing. They, bring joy to my life, but they're not my joy. They're not my only joy, right? They're not my only life. They're not the thing that makes Deanna Deanna. God does that for me. And as a result of me allowing God to do that, this person is their own person, right? They don't have to fix me. They don't have to provide all of the things that I need. They don't have to, cure this internal condition that I have. That's an amazing thing today for me, because I've struggled so many years in sobriety to make the man the thing, the only thing. And it's never worked for me.
I totally relate. That was so good. Thank you. I want to talk to you about, I know we only have about 12 minutes left, but I do want to touch on this because I think it is a beautiful thing that happened. You talked about taking your brother's kids, and so you take care of your nephews. Do you mind just sharing that little part of you and how you've been able to show up for them and what that relationship is like with them today?
Yeah, for sure. I would love to talk about that. It's been such an awesome experience. I mean, completely awesome, experience. I thought that the steps would allow me to help alcoholics. That's it. I just help alcoholics, and, that's awesome. I love that. But what step 12 says is that I practice these principles in all my affairs. And, that means is I get to help other people too, not just alcoholics. And what God gave me was the unique ability to show these kids that you can come from a dark place, and you can come from abuse, and you can come from nothing, and you can rely on God, and you can have it all. You can have it all back. You can be free. You can have a great life. I started taking them to my home group really early, really early. Both of their parents are drug addicts. And so I took them to my AA group really early when I first got them, and just let them sit there and listen, and get a little bit of hope about why it is that their parent is the way they are. And they started going to Al-Anon shortly after that, and being willing to go to Al-Anon, and they would even share in like Al-Anon meetings and things like that. Now my little one, he was like 8 at that time, but the two older ones, right? And they got to experience us being in the discipline of seeking God, because essentially that's what an AA meeting is, right? That's what an Al-Anon meeting is we're studying the book, we're talking to people, but we're plugging into the power. And we're studying, the manuscript for freedom through the AA 12 steps in the big book. And geez, I don't even know what to say about my life with them. It's been hard. It's been so hard. I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that it's been like, kitty cats and rainbows and everyone's loved each other, and it's just been like completely easy and really awesome. And no, no, it's been really hard. It continues to be really hard. The cool part is that God prepared me for that hardness. I think through my whole life, God prepared me to be tough enough to handle what he was going to throw at me. And it was several sick children who desperately needed somebody to show them that there was a different way of life, that you don't have to live off the government, that you don't have to lie, cheat, and steal, that you don't have to shove drugs and alcohol into your body to feel good, and just the basic things of hygiene, washing your body, taking care of yourself. They weren't taught anything about respect, about morals. I mean, just anything that you can think of, they weren't taught. And so, it's been a long journey with them in teaching them all of that stuff. But God's made me well equipped, right? I'm able to talk to God all the time and say, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? What should I do? And I follow God, and I push them to God. My oldest, when he was a senior in high school, he started becoming suicidal. And that's the time when I told him, maybe you should go to Al-Anon and you should work the 12 steps. I gained freedom from that. I gained the ability to realize that it was about me, that I was running the show and that I was blocking myself off. And I was able to see people in a different light and a different perspective through the 4th and 5th step. And maybe you should do that. And he goes, you know what? You're right. I'll try it. And he tried it. And he became happy, joyous, and free, and didn't have those thoughts again. Right? Huge miracle. Huge miracle. When my little one would say, I would say, man, I don't know where we're going to get the money for groceries next week. And he would say to me, well, you know what, Aunt Deanna, we're not alone. And I'm like, huh? And he goes, God's going to help us. I'm like, right? They know who God is. They see God working in my life and in their lives all the time. They know that they got an opportunity that a lot of kids where they were at weren't going to get, we're never going to get. It's just a huge, huge miracle and blessing. They get to see me doing what I do every single day. I tell them what I do. I tell them when God blesses me. I tell them about the miracles. I tell them, what I'm doing. They're like, how was your day today? Great. I did a Maggie's podcast today and it was awesome. I got to share this and I got to share that and God's so great. Da, da, da. They get to see that happening. And not only do I get to share that great part, but I also get to create understanding within themselves about their lives and about why their parents aren't here and about why their mom lies to them all the time, about why their mom manipulates them, about why their mom steals from them, about why their mom is not here for them, right? And I get to explain what addiction really is, and that it's a sickness, and that it's a disease, and that they don't have to hate her for that. They don't have to be mad at her about that. That, it's not because she doesn't love them. It's because drugs come first, And so that has been a huge, huge blessing that I've got to share with them over the years. And, the oldest ones still talk to their mother. They still have a relationship with their father. And they get to see them in this different light that I think, maybe they never would have got to see before. I had a lot of animosity and hate for my father for a long time. And that didn't go away until I was with my sponsor and she was able to explain to me that he was a sick person. And that stuff disappeared. And I was able to realize that he did the best for me that he possibly could. And he didn't have a lot to work with. That's why he didn't do a great job. But I'm able to get to explain that to them early in life. And I get to show up and be there for them. My little one, he's in band, and I get to be at all his band things. I get to show up and be in his life. And he gets to have somebody in his life today as a result of that too. He doesn't have to be on the street anymore. He doesn't have to steal anymore. He doesn't have to, worry about where he's going to eat next day or whatever. They've been as much of a blessing in my life as I've been in their life because they've allowed me to grow up. And they've allowed me to see how I want to change and how I want to be different. And they've also allowed me to rely on God more. And my relationship with God has exponentially grown since I've gotten them, because it has been hard. I've gotten to, see God not only show up in my life, but show up in their lives. And it's just been a huge blessing. Thank you so much for asking me about that.
Oh my God, it's so beautiful. It makes me want to cry. I think you're just the whole time, you've been talking, I think of like how you are just such a person who radiates what it is to be happy, joyous, and free, and have this program working in all areas of your life. And so I just feel like it's going to give so much hope. And I really admire your need or your willingness continued and your love for God, your willingness to continue and seek that relationship and grow that relationship. Because I think like throughout this whole podcast, your relationship with God has been the common theme, which I think is so important because that's what this program is all about, is to build that relationship with God. Thank you so much. This has been just absolutely amazing. My final question is, if you could leave us with one takeaway, either the listeners who are trying to get sober, maybe there's early in sobriety, maybe listeners who are sober but not just if someone was only going to hear one part of your podcast and this was going to be it, and you could only leave them with one thing, what would that takeaway be?
Oh, good question. I guess my one takeaway would be that the program is not about feelings, it's about action. That it doesn't matter how you feel, it matters what you do. Because there has been so many times over the years in AA and in sobriety and out of sobriety that I relied on my feeling to carry me through. It's not about feeling. It's not about my feelings at all. I'm not a morning person, and I woke up at 8:30 this morning. Did I want to do that? Absolutely not, right? Isn't it an honor to be on a Maggie's podcast and do this for you guys? Absolutely, yes. Am I going to get off of here and go, I wish I wouldn't have got up at 8:30 this morning and done that? No way. Like, it's awesome. I feel awesome already. It's not about feelings. It's about action. I don't always feel like doing the program, and that does not matter. What matters is the action I take in this program. What matters is I get up off my ass and I do it. That's it.
I'm so glad that you did. So I really appreciate it so much. This has been absolutely wonderful.
Yay,
Thank you so much. All right. Bye.
Bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this From the Vault re-release of the Magdalen House podcast. Tune in every first and third Wednesday for a new release from one of our 3 podcast series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channels by searching for The Magdalen House.